Imagine waking up, um, grabbing your personal phone off the nightstand to just check your messages, and finding it completely wiped.
Just a total blank screen.
Right, exactly. Factory reset. I mean, years of photos, your banking apps, your eSIM just gone.
And you didn't even do anything wrong. You didn't lose it. You weren't targeted by some common SIM swapper.
Yeah, you didn't download malware. It happened because your company's IT department, like the very infrastructure that's designed to protect you, was basically weaponized against you.
Which is terrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
And, you're just one of 200,000 people across 79 countries who woke up to the exact same blank screen. Welcome to August 16th, 2026.
It really is the ultimate inversion of trust. The defensive tools we've spent the last 20 years building have somehow become the most efficient offensive weapons in the modern threat landscape.
Yeah, the incident we're talking about, the Stryker Corporation wipe this past March, it's really a masterclass in how attackers have just stopped trying to break through the perimeter.
Right, because they don't need to crack the firewall anymore. I mean, why bother? They are simply acquiring the keys to the kingdom and logging in like a normal user.
And that systemic shift is exactly what we are tearing into today. We've got a massive stack of source material that, frankly, paints a deeply unsettling picture of where we are right now in the back half of 2026.
It's a lot to get through.
It is. We are looking at the French Ministry of the Interior's 2025 annual Cybercrime report, deep forensic breakdowns of these catastrophic identity breaches at Abbott Laboratories and Assurance America, and the regulatory shockwaves tearing through the EU right now with DORAs and the AI Act.
Not to mention how governments are actually fighting back.
Oh, absolutely. From the highly controversial UN Hanoi Convention to a truly unprecedented move by the White House this past spring, Executive Order 14390, which, effectively authorizes private U.S. companies to launch offensive cyber operations.
It is a dizzying amount of material, I know, but there is a distinct causal chain linking all of it.
Wow.
We're watching the complete industrialization of cybercrime force the hands of global regulators. And that, in turn, is pushing geopolitical boundaries to the brink of basically digital privateering. The rules of engagement have fundamentally changed.
They really have. Before we trace that chain, though, it's worth noting for you listening that surviving this environment requires real-time visibility and highly vetted partnerships.
For sure.
We'll get into the actual mechanics of why later, but closing that visibility gap is exactly why platforms like Breached.company and CISOmarketplace.com are sponsoring today's deep dive.
Yeah, when you hear the sheer scale of the automated attacks we're about to discuss, the necessity of those kinds of tools becomes starkly obvious.
Completely. So to understand how we arrived at government-sanctioned offensive operations like hacking back, we really have to look at the adversary's business model.
Right. And the French ministry's report on the 2025 landscape provides the best telemetry I've seen on this so far.
It's super detailed.
It is. It shows how the cybercriminal underground operates with a level of segmented efficiency that honestly rivals Fortune 500 tech firms.
Yeah, the phrase French intelligence uses is cybercrime as a service. But reading through their organizational breakdowns, it feels closer to a super aggressive venture capital model.
That's a great way to put it. The days of a monolithic hacking group doing everything from the initial breach all the way to the ransom negotiation, those days are just dead.
Long gone.
Exactly. The ecosystem is completely segmented into microservices now. You have initial access brokers, or IABs, who only focus on finding misconfigurations.
Or stealing session tokens, right?
Right. They just steal the access, package it up, and sell it on specialized dark web forums. They don't even deploy the ransomware themselves.
And they're selling it to the affiliates of ransomware as a service syndicates.
Exactly. And the developers of the ransomware, the administrators, they never actually touch the target network.
Wow, really?
Yeah, they just maintain the encryption software. They manage the Tor-based negotiation portals, and they provide what's called bulletproof hosting infrastructure.
And bulletproof hosting means they just actively ignore international takedown requests.
Yeah, got it. The affiliates rent this infrastructure, they execute the attack using the access they bought from the IABs, and then they split the profits with the administrators.
So it's the profit sharing that really hyperscales the threat. I mean, we're seeing individuals with practically zero coding ability launching these devastating multi-stage attacks.
Because the entire backend is automated for them. They just use a slick graphical user interface.
It's like checking out on an e-commerce site. But looking back at the law enforcement response in late 2024, specifically Operation Chronos taking down Lockbit, and Operation Endgame dismantling the ISIDE and Picobot botnets, there was this brief moment of optimism.
Oh, for sure. Law enforcement seized the servers, froze the crypto wallets, released the decryption keys. It felt like a massive win.
But then you look at the 2025 and 2026 data, and the attack volumes are actually accelerating. If law enforcement is taking down giant networks like Lockbit, why does the number of attacks keep climbing? Are we just cutting off one head of the Hydra?
We really are. I look at the takedown of Lockbit less like cutting off the head of a snake and more like compressing a gas.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, because Lockbit held a massive monopoly. When Europol and the FBI dismantled their infrastructure, that vacuum didn't destroy the affiliate network. It just scattered them.
Right, they all just went somewhere else.
Exactly. We immediately saw a migration to groups like Ransom Hub and Quillin. And the French report notes the rise of Termite, which is a group that literally built its variant using leaked source code from older, defunct syndicates.
So it's basically the open source software model applied to digital extortion.
Precisely. If you take down the primary maintainer of a code base, the community just forks the repository and keeps building.
And because the initial access brokers are constantly feeding fresh credentials into this decentralized market, the affiliates always have targets.
Always. And this reliance on IABs highlights the shift from network exploitation to identity exploitation.
Because when you buy valid credentials, you aren't really hacking.
No, you're authenticating, you're logging in. And that brings us to the Abbott Laboratories breach in mid-June of this year, which perfectly illustrates the catastrophic failure of traditional perimeter defenses when identity is compromised.
Right. The context around the Abbott breach is so crucial. On March 23rd, 2026, Abbott finalized a $20.6 billion acquisition of Exact Sciences, the cancer diagnostics firm.
A massive deal.
Huge. But just 12 weeks into that merger, the group ShinyHunters completely decimated the legacy Exact Sciences infrastructure.
Yeah, mergers and acquisitions create what security architects call the integration window. It is by far the most vulnerable period in a company's life cycle.
Why is that? I mean, it sounds like when you buy a house, you just inherit the previous owner's termite problem. But surely a $20 billion merger comes with top-tier security vetting.
You'd think so, but you are essentially trying to surgically connect the nervous systems of two different patients while they're both sprinting on treadmills.
Wow. Okay, that sounds like a nightmare.
It is. You have legacy permissions from the acquired company mapping to new administrative roles in the parent company. It creates all this ghost access that neither IT department has fully audited yet.
So it's just a bunch of blind spots. But the crazy part is, the vector wasn't a sophisticated zero-day exploit against a server. ShinyHunters used voice phishing.
Vishing.
Yeah, they literally just called them up.
They called up legacy Exact Sciences employees, posed as the Abbott integration IT team, and directed them to a login portal. But we need to be really clear about why this worked, because they didn't just ask for a password.
No, they didn't. They deployed an adversary in the middle, or ATM reverse proxy architecture.
So how does an ATM work in this context? The technical mechanics are essential to understand, because it breaks our legacy definition of multi-factor authentication.
Right, MFA. We always thought that was the silver bullet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Historically, we told users that if they have a hardware token or an authenticator app on their phone, they are secure. But in an ATM attack, the victim navigates to a lookalike domain.
A fake website.
Right. But that fake domain acts as a transparent reverse proxy. It passes the victim's traffic directly to the real Microsoft authentication servers in real time.
Oh, wow. So the user types in their credentials on the fake page. The reverse proxy just hands it straight to Microsoft.
Exactly. And then Microsoft triggers the real MFA challenge to the user's phone.
And the user looks at their phone, sees a perfectly legitimate login request from Microsoft, and hits approve.
And here is the fatal flaw. Microsoft sees the approved MFA and generates a legitimate session token.
Which is like a cryptographic cookie, right?
Yeah, it acts as a VIP pass.
Yep.
It tells the system, hey, this user is fully authenticated and doesn't need to log in again for, say, 30 days.
But the attacker is sitting in the middle.
Right. The reverse proxy intercepts that session token before it ever reaches the user's browser. It steals a copy and then drops the user on the real corporate homepage so they don't get suspicious.
So the attacker now has a pass the cookie capability. They can literally just inject that stolen session token into their own browser.
And they completely bypass the password and the MFA entirely. Because as far as the identity provider is concerned, The authentication challenge was already solved.
That is wild. And because of that M&A integration window you mentioned, the specific Microsoft Entra single sign-on account they compromised was heavily overprivileged.
Extremely. We use federated identity SSO to reduce password fatigue.
Yeah.
One login grants you access to everything via SAML or OETH protocols.
Which means stealing just one session token gave ShinyHunters administrative access to ServiceNow, SharePoint, Databricks, Coupa, and the core Microsoft environment itself.
The blast radius is just immediate and sweeping. The payload they exfiltrated from Abbott was devastating.
30 million customer records, 1 million social security numbers, and 22 million doctor-patient clinical notes.
22 million clinical notes. We are talking about the granular, deeply personal conversations between oncologists and cancer patients, now just sitting on a dark web extortion blog.
The psychological leverage that gives a threat actor is immense. But what makes the Abbott situation so fascinating from a threat intelligence perspective is that it was a double breach.
Yes. The forensics showed a completely unrelated threat actor, shadowed by 3-3, inside the exact same environment during the exact same week.
Right, and they used a completely different methodology. They didn't hit the SSO infrastructure at all. They used compromised customer credentials to log into Abbott's Lab Central portal.
And then systematically crawled the back-end APIs to siphon out proprietary technical reference documents.
Which proves that identity isn't just an internal employee problem anymore. It's an external customer problem, too.
Absolutely.
But, while Abbott lost data, the Stryker breach we mentioned at the start of this deep dive proves that compromised identity can result in total physical destruction of the hardware itself.
The Stryker attack by the Iran-backed group Handala on March 11th is arguably the most significant architectural warning of the decade.
It's the one that keeps me up at night.
Same here. This was a malware-free attack. They utilized living off the land or LODOL techniques.
Let's dig into the telemetry of this because it really is terrifying. Living off the land basically means the attackers aren't dropping custom executables or malicious payloads, right? The kind of stuff that an EDR, an endpoint detection and response tool, would normally flag.
Exactly. Handala acquired highly privileged domain admin credentials and authenticated directly into Stryker's Microsoft Intune environment.
And Intune is a unified endpoint management platform, a UEM.
Right. It's the central nervous system the IT department uses to push updates, enforce security policies, and manage fleets of devices globally.
And to manage a device, whether it's a corporate server or an employee's personal iPhone enrolled in a BYOD program, the UEM requires root-level administrative control over the operating system.
Which means, by compromising the identity of the administrator who controls the UEM, Handala effectively gained root access to 200,000 devices simultaneously.
And they didn't deploy ransomware? They didn't lock the files?
No, they didn't need to. They used the UEM's native functionality, the mobile device management payload profiles, and the Apple push notification service
to issue a completely legitimate, cryptographically signed factory reset command.
In a 3-hour window, they turned the building's own sprinkler system into a gasoline pump.
That is such a vivid way to put it.
Because the command came from the trusted management console, the endpoint security tools on the laptops and phones didn't block it. They executed it. It erased the entire corporate fleet across 79 countries.
Stryker confirmed a material financial impact on their Q1 earnings from the operational downtime. Patient medical devices were thankfully isolated on a different network architecture and survived, but the corporate side was totally flattened.
Completely wiped.
And this brings up a massive legal and architectural nightmare. If I am a Stryker employee who just lost years of personal data on my own iPhone because I installed the company's MDM profile just to check my email, who is liable?
The class action lawsuits currently moving through the courts right now are going to define BYOD policies for the next generation. The liability is just massive.
Well, I can't even imagine.
But from an architectural standpoint, the Stryker wipe forces us to reevaluate centralized control, with centralized device management to increase security and visibility.
Right, but in doing so, we created a single cryptographic point of failure.
Exactly. Preventing this requires moving away from implicit trust. You just cannot allow a single compromised administrator session to push a destructive command to 200,000 devices without multi-party authorization.
Like requiring 2 people to turn the launch keys.
Exactly. Or continuous, hardware-bound cryptographic verification.
But once that infrastructure is wiped, or in Abbott's case, once the data is exfiltrated, it exposes a secondary systemic problem. The attackers don't just destroy data, they hoard it.
Oh, they hoard everything.
And the sheer volume of unstructured data they are stealing is completely breaking our traditional incident response timelines. Which brings us to the Assurance America breach.
Right. The timeline of the Assurance America incident really highlights this growing disparity between machine speed attacks and human speed investigations.
It's staggering. The initial intrusion occurred over just 2 days, March 16th and 17th of this year. But the investigation wasn't concluded, and notifications weren't sent out until June 15th.
That is a 90-day window where the attackers are actively monetizing the data and the victims are completely unaware.
And the reason for this delay isn't necessarily corporate negligence, right? It's the nature of unstructured data forensics.
Yeah, it's a logistical nightmare. If an attacker steals a structured SQL database, you can run a query and know exactly which columns and rows were compromised in minutes.
But attackers aren't just taking databases anymore.
No, they are increasingly targeting file shares, SharePoint repositories, email servers. They're stealing unstructured data, PDFs, scanned insurance claims, loose Word documents, random image files.
It's the equivalent of someone stealing millions of physical filing cabinets and just dumping all the paper on the floor.
Exactly. To figure out whose data was in those cabinets, the incident response firms have to use optical character recognition, or OCR, and natural language processing.
To basically rip the text out of those images.
Right. And then manually review the output to match a name to a leaked driver's license or a medical record.
And while the forensic accountants are spending 90 days reading PDFs, your employees' stolen credentials and session tokens are already being brokered on the dark web.
They're already gone. And this is the exact visibility gap that platforms like Breach.company are designed to close.
Which is why we brought them up earlier.
Because they are monitoring the dark web telemetry in real time. If you are waiting 3 months for an internal audit to finish before you realize an employee's identity is compromised, you have already lost the war.
You need to know the exact moment that data hits the criminal ecosystem. Because the haul from Assurance America was highly specific and totally devastating. 6.9 million government-issued driver's licenses.
And the street value of a driver's license far exceeds a credit card.
Why is that?
Well, a credit card is a temporary token. You cancel it, the bank issues a new one, the fraud is contained. But a driver's license number, combined with your physical biometric data, your photo, height, eye color, that is a permanent identifier.
It's a logistical nightmare. You can't just call the DMV and cancel your face.
You really can't.
Yeah.
And the criminals know this. They use these licenses to fuel synthetic identity fraud.
Okay, synthetic identity fraud. Explain how that actually works.
They will take a legitimate driver's license number and pair it with a stolen social security number from a completely different victim and literally invent a new synthetic person.
Wait, really? And the systems just accept it?
Yeah. Because the data points are individually real, the credit bureaus' algorithms often fail to flag the combination as fraudulent.
Wow.
The criminals use these synthetic identities to open lines of credit, secure auto loans, or commit massive insurance fraud.
So when you aggregate the 6.9 million licenses from Assurance America, the 14 million customer records from the Panera Bread breach in January, and the 10 million incredibly intimate dating profiles stolen from Match Group.
It paints a terrifying picture.
It does. You realize the cybercriminal underground isn't just building target lists. They're building a shadow database of the entire global population. Are we reaching a point where we just have to assume all our data is already out there?
I think we have to. The stolen data is no longer the end product of the crime. It is the raw training material for the next generation of attacks.
Which leads right into the AI problem.
Exactly. And this is where the French ministry's report on the dual-use nature of artificial intelligence becomes genuinely alarming. The criminal ecosystem has integrated large language models and large action models at an astonishing pace.
Let's break down the tactical evolution here. Historically, spear phishing required a human to do reconnaissance, write a tailored email, and hope the target clicked. But by feeding those massive troves of stolen data into an LLM,
attackers are generating hyper-personalized automated spear phishing campaigns at a scale that was previously just impossible.
There are no more spelling errors.
None. An AI can ingest the Panera Bread leak, the Match Group leak, and the Assurance America leak all simultaneously.
Just connect all the dots.
Right. It can identify that a specific target frequently orders breakfast in a specific zip code, recently matched with someone who works in finance and drives a Honda Civic.
That is so specific.
And then the LLM will autonomously draft an email that perfectly mimics the tone and formatting of the victim's auto insurance provider, referencing their exact vehicle and location to deliver a malicious payload.
It totally bypasses human skepticism because the contextual accuracy is flawless. If an AI can do that, how is a standard employee supposed to know what's real?
It's incredibly difficult. And they are taking this way beyond text. The rise of deepfake as a service, or DFIS, is supercharging the vishing tactics we saw at Abbott Labs.
We are seeing real-time voice cloning where an attacker only needs, what, a 3-second audio sample?
Literally 3 seconds. Pulled from a corporate YouTube video or a leaked voicemail. And they use it to synthesize an executive's voice.
The psychological manipulation is profound.
It really is. The attacker calls a mid-level finance manager, spoofing the internal caller ID. The synthesized voice of the CEO, matching the cadence and slight accent perfectly, claims they are in a confidential acquisition meeting.
And they need an urgent, off-book wire transfer authorized immediately.
Exactly. When the biological trust mechanisms we rely on, recognizing a voice, seeing a face on a video call, are hacked by AI, implicit trust becomes a critical vulnerability.
It forces a total architectural shift toward cryptographic verification. You cannot trust the voice on the phone. You have to trust the mathematical proof of the cryptographic key authenticating the session.
Absolutely.
But the AI threat isn't just about tricking humans, right? The French report also details the deployment of autonomous large action models, or LAMs. What is the difference between an LLM and a LAM?
So, a standard large language model generates text. A large action model executes tasks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Threat actors are deploying autonomous AI agents into networks. You give the LAM an objective, say, exfiltrate the domain controller credentials, and it just operates independently.
It doesn't need a human driving it.
Right. It interacts with the environment, parses the responses from the network, adjusts its tactics dynamically based on the defensive telemetry it encounters, and executes complex attack chains at machine speed.
So we basically have autonomous AI agents attacking and defensive AI agents analyzing logs trying to stop them. It's a machine-on-machine arms race.
It is. But the attackers are also targeting the defensive AI directly through a technique called data poisoning, which is just conceptually fascinating.
Yeah, explain data poisoning.
It's the manipulation of the AI's learning process via gradient descent attacks or feature collision.
Okay, that's very technical. Break that down for us.
Instead of trying to evade the endpoint detection software, the attacker subtly alters the training data that security AI uses to learn what malicious behavior actually looks like.
They are essentially gaslighting the security model.
Precisely. Over time, by feeding the model slightly modified, benign-looking samples that actually contain the attacker's specific malware signatures, they teach the AI that this specific malicious behavior is normal.
So they create a deliberate blind spot in the model's neural network.
Right. And when the actual attack launches later, the defensive AI ignores it because it was mathematically trained to view that specific anomaly as baseline traffic.
The technical sophistication required to pull off a feature collision attack on a production model is just staggering.
It really is.
And it highlights a harsh reality. Companies can no longer rely on best effort security. You can't just buy a firewall, run an annual phishing simulation, and hope for the best.
Not anymore.
The sheer volume and complexity of these attacks have forced regulators to step in, and the European Union has brought down the heaviest regulatory hammer we have ever seen.
The regulatory landscape in 2026 is completely defined by the EU's aggressive push to mandate systemic resilience.
Because in a globalized digital economy, the Brussels effect dictates that EU regulations essentially become global standards.
Exactly. And the Digital Operational Resilience Act, or DORA, which went into full enforcement in January of 2025, is completely upending how the financial sector and their third-party tech providers operate.
Let's unpack the reporting requirements under DORA because they are brutal.
Very brutal.
Under DORA, if a financial institution suffers a major incident, they are legally mandated to report it to the competent authority within a 4-hour window of classification.
A 4-hour window fundamentally breaks traditional security operations.
Yeah, as we discussed with Assurance America, manual investigations take months.
Right, so DORA forces institutions to automate their telemetry and incident classification. You must have real-time monitoring capable of instantly defining the scope of an anomaly and triggering a regulatory notification.
And it extends far beyond the banks themselves. DORA targets the supply chain.
It does. A bank can no longer just sign a contract with a massive cloud provider and assume the risk is transferred. DORA mandates strict third-party vendor oversight.
Meaning, if you are an EU financial entity, you have to formally audit your critical ICT providers.
And this is where the logistics of compliance become a total nightmare for chief information security officers. You have 4 hours to report an incident across an infrastructure that might rely on 50 different third-party vendors.
Right, and if you haven't pre-vetted those vendors for DORA compliance, you are failing the audit before the breach even occurs.
Exactly. This is exactly why specialized procurement networks like CISOmarketplace.com have become indispensable.
You have to be able to instantly identify and integrate vendors that meet these draconian reporting and security standards, because the penalties for failure are existential.
Existential is the right word. DORA allows regulators to levy fines of up to 2% of total worldwide turnover for standard violations.
2% of global revenue? That's massive.
And it gets worse. Periodic penalty payments of 1% of average daily worldwide turnover for every day a critical issue goes unaddressed.
Wow.
And it grants regulators direct oversight of the tech providers themselves. If a major cloud service goes down, the European supervisory authorities can step in and dictate remediation.
This aggressive philosophy extends to the EU AI Act, too. They categorize artificial intelligence systems into risk tiers: unacceptable, high, specific, and minimal.
Right. And if a company deploys an AI system deemed unacceptable, such as real-time biometric categorization or social scoring, the fines are devastating.
Or even if they fail to secure a high-risk system against those data poisoning attacks we discussed. The fines can reach 35 million euros or 7% of global annual revenue, whichever is higher.
It's the airline safety model applied to digital infrastructure.
This sounds like the EU is treating it like a literal pre-flight checklist. It's no longer optional, it's a legal requirement because a failure cascades through the entire economy.
Precisely.
But I have to challenge the core premise here. We're leveling massive punitive fines on companies that are the victims of highly sophisticated, nation-state adjacent cybercriminal syndicates. Does fining a bank for getting hacked by an autonomous AI agent actually stop the hackers, or does it just punish the victim?
It is a profound policy debate. The regulatory argument is that the fines are not punishing the breach, they're punishing the negligence that enabled the breach.
Okay, so it's about forcing a baseline.
Yes. By making the financial penalty for weak security higher than the cost of implementing strong security, DORA forces companies to harden the baseline infrastructure. It raises the operational cost for the attackers.
But hardening the target doesn't neutralize the threat actor. As long as these syndicates operate from safe havens that refuse to extradite them, they will just keep pivoting their tactics.
True. To actually stop the criminal infrastructure, you need global legal cooperation. Which brings us to the geopolitical battlefield and the most controversial multilateral treaty in the history of cyberspace.
Right, the United Nations Convention Against Cybercrime. It was signed in Hanoi in late 2025.
And ratified by Vietnam and others this past spring, it represents a desperate attempt to harmonize global cyber law.
The Hanoi Convention aims to bridge the jurisdictional gaps that cybercriminals exploit. If a developer in Moscow rents infrastructure in Brazil to attack a hospital in London, prosecuting that chain requires real-time data sharing and cross-border extradition.
Which is incredibly hard to do right now.
Right. So the treaty establishes legal mechanisms for governments to compel ISPs to preserve internet traffic data and expedite the sharing of digital evidence.
On paper, it is exactly what law enforcement needs to dismantle the RAS syndicates. But in practice, the treaty is engulfed in intense, valid controversy.
We'll talk about that controversy because it's significant.
When you look at the origins of the treaty, it was initially sponsored by the Russian Federation in 2019. The friction stems from the definition of cybercrime.
Because the language is incredibly broad. Critics, including major human rights NGOs and tech conglomerates, point out that the treaty doesn't just target hacking or ransomware.
No, it targets crimes committed using information and communications technology.
The broad scope is the danger. If a nation defines political dissent, investigative journalism, or organizing a protest as a crime against the state,
they can weaponize the Hanoi Convention. They can force foreign tech companies to hand over the encryption keys and IP logs of dissidents.
It basically provides an internationally recognized legal framework for authoritarian regimes to bypass domestic privacy laws and conduct transnational surveillance, all under the guise of fighting cybercrime.
And the negotiation transcripts show exactly how fraught this was. Coalitions led by authoritarian states repeatedly attempted to strip explicit human rights protections and privacy safeguards from the text.
So we have a situation where democracies want to catch ransomware gangs, but authoritarian states might want to use the exact same treaty to catch political dissidents. How do you reconcile a global law when the globe doesn't agree on what a crime is?
You can't, or at least you can't do it quickly. Multilateral treaties through the UN require agonizing compromises, they take years to ratify, and they lack robust enforcement mechanisms when state actors simply ignore the rules.
And because the diplomatic process is so slow and the REA syndicates are moving at the speed of AI, the United States made a calculation earlier this year.
They decided that playing pure defense while waiting for international law to catch up was a failing strategy.
Which leads us to the most aggressive, paradigm-shifting document in our source stack today. On March 6, 2026, President Trump issued Executive Order 19390, combating cybercrime, fraud, and predatory schemes against American citizens.
This order fundamentally rewrites the rules of engagement in cyberspace. It establishes the National Coordination Center Operational Cell.
The NCC.
Right. But the critical shift is the authorization mechanism. The U.S. government is now officially mobilizing vivid, private U.S. cybersecurity and tech companies
To conduct cyber surveillance and cyber effects operations against foreign, cyber-enabled transnational criminal organizations, or CETCOs. Let's translate cyber effects operations out of government speak.
We are talking about offensive cyber warfare.
We are talking about hacking back. The United States government is granting legal authorization to private corporations to proactively hack into foreign servers, disrupt botnets, delete stolen data, and dismantle the infrastructure of ransomware syndicates.
It is the privatization of active defense. The government recognized that the private sector, the major cloud providers, the threat intelligence firms, they have better visibility, faster innovation cycles, and vastly more resources than federal agencies.
So by legally harnessing that power, they are aiming to degrade the criminal infrastructure before the attacks reach U.S. networks. This sounds a lot like digital privateering.
It's a very apt comparison.
We're essentially giving private cybersecurity firms a letter of marque to hunt down pirates in cyberspace. But what happens if a private company accidentally takes down a foreign hospital while trying to disrupt a ransomware gang?
The potential for catastrophic collateral damage is exactly why the executive order is heavily constrained by strict guardrails. The operations cannot be independent. They must be strictly supervised by the NCC operational cell.
And private companies are explicitly forbidden from targeting nation-state infrastructure. They can only target non-state criminal entities. But the lines between a state intelligence service and a cybercriminal syndicate are incredibly blurred. How does a private company confidently attribute a server to a criminal gang and guarantee it's not a front for a foreign intelligence operation?
The attribution problem is definitely the Achilles heel of the order. The framework addresses this by assuming a foreign group is not state-sponsored unless explicit intelligence proves otherwise.
But if they hit the wrong server, a private company could inadvertently trigger a kinetic response from a nuclear-armed state.
Which is why it mandates a rigorous multi-agency deconfliction process. Before a private firm can launch an offensive payload, the operational package must be reviewed and approved by the Department of Justice, the State Department, the Treasury, and the Department of Defense.
They also instituted the critical outcomes limitation. Private actors are forbidden from executing any operation that could result in the loss of life, serious physical injury, or any action that would rise to the level of an armed attack under international law.
Which is meant to prevent a private company from taking down a power grid or manipulating air traffic control systems.
Interestingly, the EO also includes a victims restoration program. The offensive operations will inevitably seize cryptocurrency wallets controlled by these syndicates.
Right, and the Attorney General is tasked with developing a mechanism to remit those clawed-back funds directly to the victims of the ransomware attacks.
It's a fascinating combination of offensive warfare and victim restitution. But setting the restitution aside, the reality is that the United States has legally authorized private corporations to conduct offensive cyber operations. The barrier between civilian corporate IT and militarized cyber warfare is gone.
It is the combination of the industrialization we discussed at the very beginning. When cybercrime becomes a scalable, AI-driven global industry, the defense must become equally aggressive and decentralized.
It is a completely different reality than it was just 2 years ago. Let's take a breath and retrace this staggering journey we've been on today. We started by analyzing the French cybercrime report.
exposing how the ransomware as a service economy has segmented into highly efficient, specialized supply chains relying on initial access brokers rather than brute force hacking.
We examined how that reliance on stolen identity led to the devastating ATM attacks during the Abbott Laboratories integration window, compromising 22 million patient records.
We broke down the telemetry of the Stryker wiper attack, demonstrating how attackers use our own unified endpoint management systems against us to execute malware-free destruction on a global scale.
We looked at the agonizing 90-day forensic delays in unstructured data breaches like Assurance America, and how the theft of 6.9 million driver's licenses is feeding synthetic identity fraud.
We explored how artificial intelligence is acting as the ultimate multiplier, turning that stolen data into hyper-personalized phishing, flawless voice cloning, and autonomous large action models, while simultaneously poisoning the datasets of our defensive AI.
We then navigated the massive regulatory response, detailing how the EU's DORA mandate forces impossible 4-hour incident reporting windows and strict vendor oversight under the threat of existential fines.
We weighed the geopolitical paradox of the UN Hanoi Convention, trying to establish cross-border jurisdiction without sacrificing human rights.
And finally, we dissected the monumental shift of U.S. Executive Order 13390, ushering in an era of digital privateering where private companies are authorized to conduct offensive cyber operations against foreign criminal infrastructure.
The through line is undeniable. The perimeter is gone, trust must be cryptographically verified, and the sheer scale of the threat has forced both regulators and militaries to rewrite the boundaries of digital sovereignty.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the 2026 threat landscape, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We have spent the last 20 years building technologies inherently designed to connect everything.
We connected our hospitals to the cloud, our cars to cellular networks.
Our financial systems to global APIs, and our personal identities to federated single sign-on platforms. We viewed connectivity as the ultimate virtue.
But as governments authorize offensive cyber operations, as autonomous AI agents learn to exploit those connections at machine speed, and as our own centralized management tools are weaponized to wipe entire fleets of devices globally.
The defining question for the next decade isn't how we further connect our world. The question is whether we will have the architectural courage to selectively disconnect it, just to survive.
A sobering thought to take with you.
Thank you, as always, for joining us on this deep dive, and a massive thank you to our sponsors, CISOmarketplace.com and Breach.company. When the landscape moves this fast, having the right visibility and the right vetted partners isn't just best practice. It is the only way to operate. Stay curious, stay secure, and we'll see you next time.